Today, this talk is an extension of the previous one. So we just touched wound biology in the last day. We'll go through the stages and necessary biological stuff that you need to think about wounds today. This is just a reference presentation I'm doing. So the first thing is the skin. You should always remember there are layers to the skin. That is the basic thing. Wait. You should remember that there are layers to the skin. There is epidermis, dermis, hypodermis, and below the hypodermis there are important structures. So epidermal, the epidermal damage, you don't have to worry about much. When the dermis is damaged, there are hair follicles and all the stuff that can get damaged, and it is a little bit painful. Then the epidermis and dermis are both painful, and the hypodermis means the fat tissue is also exposed, and it will take a little bit of more time to heal. And you need all those wound care gimmicks to attend to that sort of wound. So you should just remember this picture, and when you are thinking, when you see a wound, just think about which layer am I dealing here with, like. So a little introduction to the anatomy of skin. The epidermis is the outermost layer of skin. It provides waterproof barrier and creates our skin tone. And there is the beneath that there's the dermis. So it contains tough connective tissue, hair follicles, and sweat glands. So when you have a full thickness burn or just degloving injury, all these are gone. And say venous ulcer, which extends, it's like grade 4 sort of ulcer. When it heals, the skin is left with nothing to protect. No protective organelles like hair follicles and sweat glands are there. Those are not there, so you have to attend to moisture and all those things are when you heal after healing the wound. And then the deep subcutaneous tissue, hypodermis, is that made of fat and connective tissue. So you have to just remember these three layers. This is very important. So then our original question: what is a wound? We are talking about skin wounds, obviously. So it's a break or an opening in your skin. Very simple. So something like this. So I told you the last time that all wounds start as acute, and all wounds heal. The natural tendency of the body is to heal. For that, there are natural repair processes. So since the body wants to heal, about 90% of wounds they heal without any care, and some of the wounds even heal despite bad care, because of the natural healing process is strong. So what makes a chronic wound? I mean, it's very difficult to produce a chronic wound. To do that, there should be several mechanisms acting. Something drastic should happen. That you should remember that it's difficult to create a chronic wound, because the natural healing processes are, I mean, they have evolved as such that 90% of wounds heal with even without care or with bad care. So what makes a wound chronic? Apparently, failure to heal. So, and a repetitive injury of sorts. I think it's clear. The take-home point in this slide is very important. All wounds start as acute wounds, and natural repair processes are strong, and all wounds heal, and it's very difficult to make a chronic wound. And another thing that you must remember when you are seeing a wound is the parts of the wound. How to describe to yourself and how to examine a wound. What are the parts of a wound? There is a base, there is a surface, and there is the edge. And some wounds, good wounds, have corners. Surgical incisions and stuff, they have corners. It's good to have a corner actually. So you have to think what's in the base, and you have to think about what the surface is like, and what's the wound edge is like. So basically, what's in the base? It's in a acute wound. There may be superficial fascia, muscle, some maybe bone, whatever. And in a chronic wound, what do you get? Chronic wound may be necrotic tissue, slough, maybe dead muscle, something like that. So, and the surface of the wound, what does it carry? Surface should ideally it should be clean, healthy granulation tissue. So, what sort of granulation tissue is it? Is it a slough? And in the base, I'm going back to the base. One other thing important is pus. And talk about the surface. So you have to identify what sort of granulation tissue is there. And the corner, not the corner, the edge. The edge is very important. Whether the edge is chronic fibrous edge, or is it ready to move? Is it ready to epithelize the wound? Is it a healthy edge? Chronic venous ulcers, you might have seen a white edge, which is fibrotic, and it's never going to move. No, you're never going to help in the healing. So the next question is, how do wounds heal? Now you know something about the skin. The break in the skin is a wound, and then we talked about what parts of a wound, and now how do they heal? The last time I spoke about 4 stages of healing: hemostasis, inflammation, proliferation, and remodeling. This should be bread and butter. When you're thinking of a wound, you must think of these all these 4 stages should cross your mind. So this is a good depiction of that. So what is hemostasis? You may remember from your physiology days that hemostasis is a physiological process of clotting. So what happens there? The platelets stick together, seal the breaks in the walls of the blood vessels, and coagulation occurs. And fibrin as a binding agent. And what's the final product? Final product is a clot or a thrombus in the wound area. what happens next? So this clot gets inflammatory cells. So why do you need inflammation? To prevent infection, prevent bleeding, and this fluid engorgement aids the repair cells to come in. And during this inflammatory phase, the damaged cells, the necrotic cells, whatever the debris of the original damage, and pathogens, contaminating bacteria, and everything is removed. So it's necessary. The inflammatory stage is necessary, but for a certain extent. The inflammatory stage can be detrimental also. So just remember that. The natural part of wound healing. And then the proliferative phase. Proliferative phase, what does that do? So the wound has to rebuild itself. New tissue, collagen, extracellular matrix, and new blood vessels, a new network of blood vessels, a lot of blood vessels, and fibroblasts, and this is where you see granulation tissue. So during this proliferative stage, what does the wound need? Wound needs an optimal supply of blood, and blood should contain oxygen, hemoglobin should be okay, protein should be okay. So all the the micronutrients that we usually don't look at, those also should be okay for a good proliferative stage. And then the epithelialization happens. So epithelialization is a different story. Just remember that if the wound edge is healthy, the epithelium is very picky to travel. It doesn't climb mountains or go down. No. The surface has to be even with the skin. Otherwise, it won't go into troughs, so it go climb mountains. So that's about epithelialization in proliferative stage. So here you see granulation tissue. So you have to train your eye to identify good granulation from bad granulation tissue. So we'll probably talk about that in a later presentation with a case discussion. That's the easiest way to do it. But the best way to do it is to go to a ward and discuss the patient actually. So anyway, you must have seen enough granulation tissue. No? So just remember the good granulation tissue is pinpoint, glistening, and it's a charm to look at. It doesn't bleed easily. And dark granulation tissue is dark granulation tissue is bad granulation tissue, and it comes in blobs. It can indicate so many things. So then maturation. What happens is the collagen is remodeled from type 3 to type 1, and the blood vessels and all those stuff that in excess are no longer needed, and they are removed by apoptosis. That is programmed cell death. So everything is reorganized, and crosslinks form, and this process will continue from 3 months to 1 year. Right? So you should always remember it starts from about 21 days on the injury, and then will continue to, about 1 year. So if you heal a big chronic ulcer, you have to look after it for at least about 1 year. You have to advise the patient to moisturize it, this support the maturation process. Otherwise, if the patient gets another scratch or a crack in the skin or whatever, small wound during that first year, he will end up in other ulcer. So that has to be remembered. That's why this maturation process to think about it is very important. The other thing is you only get 80% of the tensile strength of the unwounded skin. So little bit into the systemic barriers to why doesn't it heal to wound healing. So first thing is age. You usually the chronic wound burden is in the aging population. So age makes it slower. Ultimately, age wins. So then the other thing is the bioburden. So how the more the bioburden, sluggish the wound. Now we'll be talking about what bioburden is and how to classify it and from where to where it goes and all in a later slide. So the other thing is infection. Bioburden is not really infection. So the presence of infection, it has devastating effects. Like it does destroy all the tissue and newly growing and stuff and all that, and then the inflammatory stages prevail, and wound excavate, edema, erythema, all of this contribute to delayed healing. So so many things. It does so many things. The infection. So the other thing is chronic disease that I don't have to actually explain. And then the body build obese patients tend to heal slow. And anyway, adipose tissue is poor in oxygen supply, so it heals slow. And the other thing is psychophysiological stress, pain, and everything that is nasty. This gives you a bad healing experience, especially pain. It gives vasoconstriction as well. And then chemical stress. You do a lot of cleansing and antiseptics, betadine, EOD, and then you give a lot of chemical stress to the wound. That is also a barrier to healing. And obvious is PVD circulation, so it has to be optimal. And immunosuppressive disease, HIV, AIDS, malnutrition, obviously, and medication. So, and to talk about the wound itself, local barriers to wound healing are pressure, desiccation, constant contamination. I think I spoke to you on these things last time also, so we'll just rush through this. Edema, non-viable tissue, temperature, blood supply, personal, and all that. So to talk about more on wound biology, we'll talk about some common pathogens. So you all know the pathogens are divided into gram positives, gram negatives, and aerobes and anaerobes, that sort of thing. So this is important in when you are deciding on empirical antibiotics. So usually some staph and strep gram positives, and you occasionally get E. coli, Klebsiella, and most common pathogen is Pseudomonas. This is an Indian study I got. Sri Lanka, actually, if we do this, the Pseudomonas will come up, I'm sure. So just remember, these are the common ones in Sri Lanka. What we see is staph, Streptococcus, Pseudomonas, and E. coli. So just a recap of microbiology. Remember that gram positives are there, gram negatives are there, and there are cocci and rots, and that's not very important. So Staphylococcus is a gram positive cocci, Streptococcus is a gram positive coccus, and Pseudomonas is a gram-negative rod. Again, the same thing. So now we go in. Now we know a little bit about, just recap about bacteria. So what is the bacterial burden, bioburden? Talk about contamination. The wound is contaminated. A clean wound gets contaminated. Something's just put onto the wound. No, the bacteria is not proliferating. Just in the surface, just put. So contaminated wounds, they don't show host response, no evidence of host injury. That means it's not doing actually anything to the wound at the moment. So then it gets colonized. Bacteria starts proliferating on the surface. But still no injury. They are not doing any harm. They are just proliferating and they are there. And they are no, the body doesn't have to react to anything. Just they are also there, we are also here. Like that sort of balanced situation, colonization. That's not really harmful. And if you swab it, there will be a pathogen. Most of the chronic wounds are such. There are no point in swabbing though. If the wound is healing. So then it goes into critical colonization, proliferating in surface, and there is evidence of host injury, bad granulation tissues, smell, exudate, everything. So that's sort of a local infection. And then spreading infection. Proliferating bacteria on and in the wound and surrounding tissues. They go into the tissues. Then you have the visible host response with the host injury. And then you go into systemic infection, that is sepsis. The wound surrounding have spread systemic. So those are the 4 levels of bacterial burden. So what happens? Colonization, nothing. Infection, fever, altered blood cells, and all that, and then sepsis. Yes, all of this. Septic go into septic shock. So just remember that you have uncontrolled diabetes, or you're a renal kidney recipient, or you have HIV. They will just go about maybe 72 hours from a small wound to septic shock, full blown sepsis. So then the main problem in our chronic wounds is this. The biofilm. You all must have seen biofilm enough in your drainage tube, in your sink drainage tube. If you have cleaned it when you even small, that is biofilm. That's jelly-like thingy. That is biofilm. That's what exactly happens when the wound surface. We can't see it, but there are adherent bacteria which will grow and form a matrix and become mature and then release active bacteria. Those are dormant forms that are in the lower layers, and this jelly layer, and there are a lot of inhibitory stuff and all that. Whatever we put onto the wound surface, it doesn't work. Whatever we give systematically, it doesn't work because the lower layers are inactive bacteria. They are not active. Their processes are not active, so we can't attack anything because they are sleeping. The active bacteria are protected by this viscous layer. So then, what do you do to biofilm? It is just an idea of biofilm. This is why most wounds don't heal. They are stuck in the inflammatory stage. Just remember that. So maybe even if you swab, if the biofilm is not mature enough to release, you might not even get something. But still, you have to suspect it. So what do you do to it? Actually, mechanical removal is the best. because there are only three methods to remove a biofilm in this world: chemical, which we can't do; mechanical, that we can do; and heat. Can't pour hot water onto the wound. So you just have to remove it, surgically remove it. There are, I will, when we are talking about dressings, there are few that have actually penetrance to about 0.8 nanometers. Some preparations we will talk about in the dressings, but those are, you have to have really real experience in how to manage those things. But anyway, the mechanical removal is the best. So we talk about bacteria. So we'll talk about the antibiotic ladder. So before that, we have to have just a recap of what we learned about the antibiotics. So this is a diagrammatic representation of what they do. So for bacteria that has a cell wall, these penicillins, cephalosporins, and benzo, all those are effective beta lactamase. So they attack the cell wall integrity, and then the cytoplasmic membrane is attacked by polymyxins, and the ribosome translation, the protein synthesis is affected by erythromycin, chloramphenicol, clinda, all mycins, and then you have the tetracyclines and streptomycin, all that. And DNA synthesis is attacked by metronidazole, and DNA gyrase is attacked by quinolone. So DNA polymerase is attacked by rifampicin. So just a recap. I think you all can remember all this. Now there comes this gram positive and gram negative business. So you see this, the first antibiotic was penicillin, so found accidentally, and the last one to come, as far as I can remember, in 2015 was linezolid. So after that, I don't think there were any antibiotics made, because they are not interested. They are rather interested in non-communicable diseases, but it might change due to this new pandemic. So the antibiotics are the last resort. The antibiotics are the last resort, and the thing that the most important thing is that you have to be very rational in using antibiotics. Antibiotics are not wound healing medicine. When they are local or systemic sepsis, only you use antibiotics. Otherwise, you don't need antibiotics in wound care. If you use it irrationally, you are going to kill your all. You are not going to leave anything for your children. They won't have any antibiotics use. So you have to be very rational. You have to think twice and thrice when you are prescribing antibiotics for a wound, and not onto the wound bed, not at all. No, there are instances that can be used that we will talk about in the wound management. There are a few agreed upon uses, topical uses, but generally no. You are just asking for resistance. That's all. Just remember this. So if it's a gram positive you are suspecting of, you start go on that pathway. Vancomycin end up in linezolid, and then this is a gram negative. You say pseudomonas, you go to piptas and carbapenems and all that. So you just don't start piptas in the first instance. You just follow the ladder. Always follow the ladder. And then just another input on painkillers. So now you know how to and how not to use antibiotics, how to control the infection. The other problem is pain. So you have to remember the pain ladder, and pain itself is about 1.5 hours of lecture. So I can't go into detail on pain. So it's very important. No pain. Uh, 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 Pain is a different topic. But just remember when you're prescribing, just remember this analgesic ladder. Start with paracetamol, and then you can add plus some NSAIDs of sorts, and then you can even use gabapentin, like say if you think of neuropathic sort of pain, gabapentin, and a little bit of a small antidepressive, and that sort of addition also can be done. And then you can go into weak opioids, with NSAIDs, and then you drop when you step up, you drop weak opioids, and then go into strong opioids. You don't keep opioid in when you're stepping up. Step 3, and you can you can have the NSAIDs and all those other contributory supportive drugs. So the step 4 is here. It says opioid infusion. Actually, yeah, patient control, that sort of thing. But our patients, they don't go into that. So other drugs, I just spoke to you about this. Uh, you can manage with gabapentin, amitriptyline, and all those things. Usually, paracetamol works, Panadine works, and apart from that, diclofenac sodium is the maximum. You can use tramadol also. But if the pain is really severe, that means there's some problem. You have to get an opinion. So and basically we are at the end of the presentation today. I just want to tell that next time I'll do the chronic ulcer management. So we'll go into depth in that. Just think about these things, the cause and effect, and patient in general. And to talk about wound care, we'll go into detail about tissue infection, moisture, edge epithelialization, this time concept. And there's a new concept also. I'll try to talk about that as well. So that's the end of the presentation for today. So thank you very much.